Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing this morning? Yeah? All right. I am Saron. I'm a developer, founder, and creator of BCM, a membership platform for people with multiple streams of income, and it is my great honor to be your MC today. This is my second time in Switzerland, and I'm so excited to be back in these beautiful mountains to experience the second This Next Thing with all of you today. The first year of this event was an experiment. What happens when you bring a bunch of people in tech into the mountains and take over a hotel? Turns out incredible things happen. Connections happen, whether it was connecting over a few cocktails late into the night, connecting over a book swap between attendees, or connecting over the powerful words of impromptu speeches and inspiring talks. Inspiration happens. It's hard not to be inspired by the gorgeous scenery we get to experience, both in and outside of these hotel walls. The high ceilings and exquisite decor are enough to free the mind and whisk you away. But pair that with these incredible mountains, and it's simply otherworldly. Magic happens. We saw literal magic happen on stage from one of our phenomenal speakers, and we saw the magic of ideas being exchanged, topics being debated, and projects being formed. Last year, Paul and Eamon said that this next thing was a successor to their previous conference, FunConf. But I would argue that this conference has earned its right to be its own precious little thing, an experience that's just as thoughtful and unique as the organizers themselves. The themes of the talks today are magic, creativity, and meaning, and I think those are the perfect themes for this experience as a whole. I want to reflect on those themes, and together, let's take a vow. Let's vow to make magic, to find what's special and unique in the people that we meet, to present our kindest, best selves, to lead with openness and compassion, and seek connection where we can find it. In how we show up at this event, we can make this a truly magical experience. Let's vow to appreciate creativity. We will find creativity in the talks that we hear, the people we meet, the rooms we find ourselves in. Let's embrace the beauty we find in others and we see before us and let our creative spirits run free. Let's vow to find meaning, to dig a little bit deeper in a conversation or an idea, to flip over words said and sentences composed, and find what lies beneath. Let's vow not to leave this meaning behind, but to carry it with us and share it back home with the people we love. With this vow, we can create a magical, creative, and meaningful experience for us all. And with that, I'm delighted to introduce our first set of keynote speakers. Our first set of keynote speakers are Michael Lopp and Priya Shah. This is Michael's second time as a keynote speaker at This Next Thing. Last year, he spoke on the topic of magic, complete with an actual magic show. He's a veteran engineering leader who's built products and led teams at an impressive list of companies, including Pinterest, Slack, Apple, and Netscape. But you might know him better online as Rands, a prolific internet writer, having written a few books along with hundreds of blog posts and essays on a range of topics, but frequently about technology and leadership. And then following him, we'll have Priya. Priya is a product manager at Sienna AI, an LLM-driven customer service for e-commerce. Previously, she was a senior product and program manager at Apple. She's managed a diverse set of products from third-party frameworks like Core ML and SharePlay to consumer apps like Phone and FaceTime. She's played a key role in launching headline features like contact posters, live voicemail, and many more to a global audience. Unfortunately, Michael couldn't physically be with us today, but he does come to us in video form. Please give it up for Michael.
Hey guys and gals, it's your boy Lopp, and I'm pumped to be kicking off this next thing. It's going to be absolutely magical. Now, I know you're excited to get straight into the conference, but before we go there, a quick reminder to all my fans, please, please, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really, really helps the channel. Cut. This is a nightmare. YouTube is exhausting. I've been talking to you for like 37 seconds right now, and you will notice I've said nothing whatsoever. That's most of my YouTube experience, waiting for someone to get to the fucking point. Go watch 100 YouTube videos, and you can see exactly what they're incentivizing. Likes, subscribes, videos of certain links. They just don't get to the point because someone told them it's got to be 4 minutes and 10 minutes, 10 seconds long, so they don't get to the point. It's a distinct lack of authenticity. I don't know these people. I don't trust them. I'm looking for that one line to explain, how do I fix my bike? So here's the question. We're going to talk about questions quite a bit. How do we learn to trust each other? We learn by asking great questions. Now, I've interviewed thousands of people over my career, and interviews are about questions, about learning folks. And my go-to question is, what do you want to be when you grow up? It doesn't matter if you're just starting or well into your career. What do you want to be when you grow up? I watch and see how people answer it. I watch and see what they're inspired by. I watch and see how they react to a kind of an odd question. And I listen to their answer. Now, what's happened over the many years I've interviewed, there's a thing that's happened only 3 times. And the speaker who I'm helped be here is one of the people who have achieved this goal. And it goes like this. I had a 30-minute interview with this person, and it was during the pandemic. So I'm sitting there like I'm sitting right now with a shirt and a hat stuck in this little box with the cephalopod over on the other side. And we have a conversation. And I ask my questions. And when I was done, I did this thing I've only done 3 times. I immediately said to the hiring manager, as soon as the interview was done, hire this person. Immediately hire this person. I didn't explain anything. I didn't say anything. And the manager came back and said, oh, that's a strong endorsement. Well, do you want to send anyone on? Nope. You should just hire this person right now. Oh, and by the way, you only get her for 3 years. We're talking about Priya. Priya Shah is going to be talking to you for a little while here, and I had the joy to work for her for about 3 years because after about 3 years, as you'll learn, she left Apple. And because we had such a great working relationship, the moment she started thinking about leaving the company that I love, she started talking to me about it, and we started planning it, and we started figuring it out. She'd ask me questions, and I'd ask her questions. One of the reasons that I knew she was going to be only here 3 or 4 years is her enthusiasm, is her imagination, and is her thirst for knowledge. When I asked Priya, what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't exactly remember what she said, but what I know, what I remember her saying is, I want to be CEO of everything. That's what I actually heard. So with that, I'm very happy to introduce Priya Shah to walk you through study in asking questions.
I actually didn't watch that before. Lopp specifically told me not to watch it, and now I know why. It was actually 4 years, not 3, and the CEO of everything was his version of the story. But so yeah, that was not what I was expecting. So that threw me off a little bit. But good morning, we're here. I'm excited to speak to y'all. Again, I know Lopp was super excited on actually being here in person with you, but I'm glad he was able to join us with video and give us his YouTube magic. So to start things off, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. So I first interned at Apple when I was a junior in college. I walked into that giant marble spaceship, you know, you've seen it, I've seen the pictures, almost alien, ready to change the world. I was certain of all my answers. I was confident about all my ideas. And when I walked in there, I was so sure the Apple leadership team were going to hear suggestions from me that they'd never heard before. I was 21. But I've always kind of been that kid, in the front row, the empty row right there. I'd be right there with my hand up, waving, pick me, please. I loved school. I really did. And because it gave me the feeling of having all the right answers. Every right answer felt like validation. Each correct answer gave me additional validation in school. Now, I really thought in order to be successful, I needed to have all the answers. I needed to know it all. I mean, after all, answers are knowledge, right? And knowledge is power, right? And that kid up there, she kind of wanted power. And so, naturally, when she got older, she became a product manager. Now, I landed a PM role at my favorite company, but back then, I was 21. So, and early in your career, it turns out, you don't have a lot of power, or authority, or credibility. And so you're just kind of there, trying to figure out how to move things forward when you just don't know. So you have ideas, you have energy, and you want to prove yourself, but what do you do when you just don't know? So I remember the first design review that I actually joined once I joined Apple, and I had no clue what we were talking about. I honestly kind of started to feel a little deflated. I was here at my favorite company, so excited to have input and have impact. But I had no idea how I was supposed to have impact if I didn't have any of the answers. So the design review ended a little sooner than it was supposed to, which that never happens. Have you heard of a meeting that ends early? But since it did, I had the opportunity to ask a quick question. And so I asked a simple question about why we made a specific decision about the design during that meeting. And it prompted the team to rethink certain parts of the design. Wait, what just happened? Did I have impact on the actual design? Did I just say something that prompted the team to change something about the design? I did have the ability to have impact, is what I realized. But it wasn't by having all the answers. It was by having great questions. And so I'm still early in my career, and I haven't had a lot of years. But I'm extremely proud of some of the projects that I've been able to lead while my time in my career so far. And sincerely grateful for all the people like Lopp and mentors and managers who've put me in this position to be able to have that impact. Now, in order to make the most of these opportunities that I've been given, I want to have the most impact and help teams move forward. I focus on asking questions instead of having all the answers. Now, the power of a good question is undeniable. Whether it's Simon Sinek asking why in order to help inspire teams, or Marie Kondo asking, does this spark joy to help you declutter your space? Or if it's BuzzFeed asking, what kind of bread are you? When you're not sure if you're sourdough or rye, and I'm sourdough, by the way. A great question needs to have 3 key elements, according to me. First, it just needs to be really simple. It needs to be easy to understand. There can't be any additional friction to engaging with that question in the first place. And a great question also opens you up to the opposite of déjà vu, vujade. Vujade is when you look at something you've seen before many times, and all of a sudden you see it with a fresh perspective. A great question needs to have vujade. And finally, a great question makes you ask more questions to help you create a flywheel of exploration. So since asking questions has helped me so much, I kind of collect them. If someone is describing a blocker that they faced or a tricky situation that they worked themselves out of, I'll often ask, what questions did you ask to get there? And what I'm really asking is, how did you move forward when you didn't know? So today, I'd like to share with you the 3 questions that I keep coming back to when I just don't know. So for the first question is this essential? Now, last week, I was leading a feature review for the most highly requested feature from our customers. And it was our final review, just days before we were launching beta, right? Everyone's been there, it's like scrambling to the end. But in this review, someone got really obsessed with the design of the header of the window. That's it, just the header window. And the header window is this little bar at the top of an app, and we've spent 15 minutes talking about it, and once one person brings it up, everyone has an opinion about it, right? And it's the only thing anybody wants to talk about. So if I had asked the question, is this important? The answer would have been, yes, absolutely. It is important, like the details matter, obviously, and that's true. Instead, I ask, is this essential? If yes, then we keep talking about the details and continue to work that out. If no, we should move on. So with this question, is this essential? I'm asking everyone to take a step back and think about prioritization before thinking about the solutions. So as I ask, is this essential? Everyone kind of agrees that it's not. And not only can we move on to discuss about the things that are essential, we have now worked together to clearly define our strategy for version 1, for the beta, that these types of things aren't essential. When we agree as a team that something isn't essential, it reminds us all to focus on the things that are. Now, the second question is, what are we solving for? Now, this is a very simple question, but I really think we don't ask it often enough. So I'll give you a quick example. Cleaning's not fun, right? Like, especially if you come back from a long day of work, the last thing I want to do is mop my floors. And Procter & Gamble realized that, and they wanted to build a better mop. The problem is that the better the mop is at picking up dirt off the floor, the harder the mop is to clean. And so the first you have to clean your floors, and then you need to clean your mop, which is just adding more work. So no one has time for that. So they reminded themselves, what are we solving for? It was to make cleaning easier, not to build a better mop. They designed the Swiffer. And I bet at least one of you needs a refill soon, so go pick those up. This was not sponsored. Asking, what are we solving for, helps align teams, clarify our goals, and ensure that our efforts are not just busy work or adding new problems to the existing problem, but they're steps towards the tangible solutions that you want to help solve in a customer's life. So as a self-appointed design nerd, I love giving this example. Finally, what do you need? Now, I saved my favorite question for last. I've always been eager to help, just as I was eager to give answers. I consider myself a problem solver. So if someone presented a problem to me, or even if they were remotely unhappy, I ask, how can I help without hesitation every time? But in recent years, I've changed that question to what do you need? Both have very similar intention, but they have a dramatically different impact to the person on the receiving end of that question. What are they thinking about when you ask them that? If I ask, how can I help? They're now thinking about what I can do and what I cannot do, and my sphere of influence. But when I ask, what do you need? They're thinking about all the things that they're struggling with, all the things that they need help with, and their spheres of influence. So one makes it about me, and the other makes it about them. That can really change how someone responds. So not only is this one of my favorite questions to ask all the people that I work with, it's also a reframing that's helped me get significantly more insights into pain points from customers. And this helps me build better products. So I ask, what do you need to help build better products for them? These are simple questions to make you ask follow-ups and make you see things differently. They're not revolutionary, but they can be very powerful if you make a habit of intentionally using them. This question kit, as I like to call it, is the framework I use for collaborative problem solving, because a product manager is not supposed to have all the answers. So when I don't have all the answers myself, and for anybody being a great PM or a founder or a partner in your relationship, it's not about having all the answers. It's about helping teams prioritize, make progress with intention, and unblocking them with great questions. But let's face it, sometimes we just don't see eye to eye. Clearly, y'all have seen this before, but we're gonna do it anyway. Raise your hand if you see a blue and black dress. Okay, a fair number of the room. All right, team blue and black. Now, raise your hand if you see white and gold. Okay, smaller audience. We're a little skewed. I wonder if that has anything to do with what your profession is. isn't it mind-boggling to have somebody sitting right next to you see an entirely different color? Like, I know we've known this for a while, and this dress has been quite popular, but every time, it just blows my mind. Because the other thing is, I am so sure that this dress is actually light blue and gold. That's what I see. I don't see it. Okay, I see somebody there. It has the same. Okay, good. So we're the real minority. Now, this isn't a pretty dress, right? It's okay. But that's not the point. It's just so interesting to know what other people see. Otherwise, you'd only see what you see. You know what you see, but you don't know what they see until you ask a great question. And so here is where asking questions plays an even more important role in seeking different perspectives. So today, we have information at our fingertips. Getting an answer has never been easier, and it's only going to continue to get easier over time. You know, what's the record for hula hooping with one elbow, Chandana? Or how many types of apples are there? What is Dua Lipa's real name? That's actually a very popular Google search. So answers are everywhere. With knowledge becoming a commodity, it's a different perspective that can spark real innovation, thinking, and set us apart. Now, continuing to ask questions reframes our problem space, and discovering new perspectives is what will help create and alter new knowledge. So while we're here in beautiful Pontresina, surrounded by different perspectives and human intelligence, I urge you to ask questions and expand your question kit. Thank you.
All right, so next up we have Chad Fowler and Sean. Chad is the CTO and general partner at Blue Yard Capital and has made a huge impact in the tech community. He wears many hats as a software developer, a best-selling author, a conference speaker, and open source contributor. He co-created Ruby Gems, the package manager for Ruby, which set the standard for pip, NPM, and others. He co-founded and organized both RubyConf and RailsConf for over a decade. He has been invited to keynote at countless conferences worldwide. Professionally, he's led large teams, served as CTO for multiple startups, and led developer advocacy for Microsoft. You've done a lot of stuff, Chad. Jeez, you gave me so much to read. Okay.
Sorry about that.
And he'll be followed by Sean. Sean is the co-founder and CTO of Epith Inc., a stealth startup developing silent speech interfaces with the goal of making AI feel like an extension of the mind. Sean started Epith to build the positive future he read about in sci-fi books growing up, and is passionate about all things cybernetic. Previously, he's worked on other frontier tech, published a paper on swarm robotics when he was 16, developed predictive healthcare systems with biosignals, and written software for modular miniature bioreactors. Please welcome Chad Fowler and Sean.
Thank you. Are you going to do my 10? Yeah, thanks. So I have spoken. I'm really glad I don't have to tell you anything about myself because Saron just did, so that's really good. I think I misunderstood what was happening at this conference, so I think everyone else is going to talk about stuff that can help you. I was just going to get up here and try to help myself. I decided 6 years ago I was never going to speak at a conference again. It's not, yeah. I did speak at one more. I spoke at Agile India, I think, because I love to go to India. And then that was it. So 2019, that was the last conference I ever did, and I assumed that would be the last one forever. I decided I was done. And I've been sort of like descending into deciding I'm done with everything in my career over time. And I've realized recently, though, that I'm doing this not for the right reason. Like, I actually love speaking at conferences. I love doing this sort of stuff. But I think I'm experiencing some sort of an identity crisis. It might be a midlife crisis, but I'm too old for that, and I think I started that when I was like 20. So why, though? Why didn't I think I should speak at conferences anymore? It's because I didn't think I had anything to say. So something happened a few months ago. It was the same week. I met two people. Well, I didn't meet Abby, but I was met with two people, I should say. I met Sean, and it's through the course of my job. I'm a VC now, and I still can't believe that I say that. It sounds like I'm making that up. And when I met him, he was young, like lower 20s, and just blew me away with the magical things he was trying to do. And I just thought, why didn't I do that when I was in my early 20s? I think I was like playing on Beale Street still when I was his age, playing saxophone. But I was really blown away, but just like the audacity he had to believe he could create the sort of technological change that he thought he could create. I think he can. Same week, Abby asked if I would speak at this conference, and my immediate reaction was, hell no, definitely not. Not because I don't want to come, but because I don't want to speak at conferences anymore, I have nothing to say. But I started putting these two things together, and it gave me a chance to reflect on why my default answer was no. And if you know me at all, you know that I've sort of projected two things in my career. I've done a bunch of different things, obviously, but the two things that I outwardly projected were, first, purveying career advice to software developers, like trying to help people figure out how to create a remarkable career in software for themselves. Done countless talks. This is the first one I ever did. As you can see, I was 50 back then in 2006. I'm still 50 now. I wrote a book about it, etc. The other sort of line of thought that became what I thought would be sort of my life's work is focusing on the fact that it is sad as software developers that we create all these pieces of code that by the time we're done with our careers will probably be dead, probably long before the end of our careers. And they just go away. And I've had conversations at this conference about this with people. Then, like probably every line of code that I ever wrote, now that I'm managing or whatever, is gone. And so I was trying to build systems for how we as software developers can create a legacy for ourselves and leave a legacy and have that not be a bad word. So the irony of that is I've spent all this time lecturing people about building the career they want and about how to leave a legacy. Now I am no longer a software developer, and I am almost definitely never going to be one again because I'm a VC and there's all these reasons that, like I've got a 10-year commitment and I just won't, betray my colleagues. And I'm old, so I'm probably never going to be one professionally again, which means, as the guy who walked around talking about legacy, I can actually reflect and say, oh shit, I have left my legacy. It is done. It is stamped, and it's over. So that's the perspective I want to give you today. And the irony is, I am full of regret. I don't like how it turned out. I don't like the path I took. So I want to talk about that and how I might have fixed it if I could have a God's eye view and go back in time and fix it. So in so doing, I am going to share with you the dirty, cynical secrets of how I built my career. You're going to know exactly what I did. And it kind of sucks. Here is what I regret the most. So it's not him. Who knows who this is? Okay. Why the Lucky Stiff was a pseudonymous individual some of us knew in person. This was at RailsConf 2004. 2006. That was the first one, which I co-organized. He was pseudonymous. He wrote a bunch of software. He wrote a book called Why's Poignant Guide to Ruby. I thought it was ridiculous. I hated his style. I just found him annoying, really annoying. Everyone worshipped the guy. I found him horribly annoying. And the funny thing is, he left behind this quote. So what he did is he removed his identity from the internet in 2009. He no longer exists, and none of us know where he is. Maybe someone does. He just wiped every trace. I mean, he wrote so much code, so many things. He was at the conference. He was brilliant. This quote, when you don't create things, you become defined by your tastes rather than ability. And I always read that, and it resonated, But what I didn't realize is I was annoyed by him, and I didn't appreciate the fact that he was one of the only creative geniuses I had ever met. He created so much. Like, he was a real force. I was the embodiment of the negative thing he was trying to tell people about. And I sort of lived my career that way. So I didn't create a bunch of stuff. What I did, and this is the regret, is I figured out how to talk about how to create things. I always talked about optimizing processes and careers and software, and I didn't make the things. Now, in my head, I invented most of the brilliant technologies that were invented for the internet over the last 30 years. And I did. I thought of them before they happened. I knew how they would work, whether it was like instant messaging or blogging platforms and RSS and all this stuff. But I never wrote the code. I didn't do it. And sometimes I even wrote some of the code, but I never deployed it. I never pushed it out. Instead, I spent my time talking to people about how to do the thing instead of why and what you're doing. So I'm going to go way over time. I apologize. It's not even going to be a little bit over time. It's going to be way over time. Before we started, I think Saron said, it's going to be okay. You're a pro. I was like, not anymore. So I think I'll go way over time and it won't screw up the whole schedule. And if it does, then it's my fault. You want me to start? Okay, I'm going to go back to the beginning. Okay. So I started my work life as a saxophonist. I played on Memphis, Tennessee's Beale Street. I played in soul bands. It was like not real fun, but 7 nights a week up there. I took up smoking because that's what you do in between the horn section parts. But at night, I got enamored by playing with the early internet. And this is like before there were browsers or anything. So it was all terminals. You do dial-up. And I remember one night, my roommate and I were sitting all night messing with this thing after I'd been out at a gig. And we found some way that you could like browse a list of conversations to have with people and have this scratchy, barely decipherable audio conversation with people anywhere in the world. And we talked to these young women in Australia. And I remember the sound of their voice. I don't know what we were talking about. It was like, what time is it there? Just really basic stuff. And it was just mind-blowingly magical, which sounds ridiculous today. But if you're old enough to have lived before the internet, that was amazing. So I'm in Memphis, like really not technologically savvy, talking to someone across the world at a different time zone, different culture. And that's what got me to realize I have to do this internet thing. This is the rest of my life. So I'm not one of those people that was like, I'm not making enough money as a musician, let me learn how to be a software developer. I just couldn't not be a software developer. I had to figure it out. I was born in Arkansas. That's a state that some of us don't believe is the South, but it's in the South of the United States. We had a conversation this morning. It is one of the worst states in the United States. That's one of the things you should know. And you can look up all the metrics, and by all the ones we would care about, it's awful. Education being one of them. So most of my family has never left the state, even for a visit. That's the kind of culture that we have in Arkansas. I managed to escape. I got to Memphis, as I mentioned, and then somehow through some miracle, I scratched my way into having a job in corporate America as a software developer. And my mindset then was like, maybe someday I can be a middle manager at a Fortune 500 company. And that would be great, because that would be so much better than anyone in my family has ever done. But I was browsing the bookstore one day, because I didn't have a degree, so this is how I learned. I just go to the bookstore and read the books. And I found this book, Extreme Programming Explained by Kent Beck. And I had no idea what it was, but it said embrace change. And I literally said, well, that sounds cool. I'm just going to read it for that reason. It was real short. And it changed my life. It changed how I thought. And Kent Beck's work has, I told someone at this conference, he has a list of questions you can ask yourself called 3 focusing questions for focusing talks. I read it literally every time I do a talk. So I last read it yesterday. Anyway, I got way swept up into this agile extreme programming thing. And I somehow managed to convince my company to send me and a bunch of my colleagues to the premier training for this thing. So it was Kent and all of the luminaries of what became Agile. In fact, they published the Agile Manifesto while I was at that. So I was like one of the first signatories outside of the originals on the wiki. So when I was leaving it, I told a colleague, and he told me this years ago, I feel so much smarter after this week of being with these people. And I think all of you will be able to relate to that after this experience. I have to find a way to always be with these people. How do I do it? The only way I could think of is to become one of the people. So that's what I wanted. I wanted to be identified as one of those people so I can be with them and they can make me smarter and make me better. How do I do that? Because I'm just a saxophone player. I don't even know how to code, really. I'm just scratching it together. So I created systems for myself, and that is the focus of the rest of this way over talk that I'm doing. So the first system, I was really into video games. I was really into RPGs, and I thought, okay, I need to figure out what to do, and then I need to figure out how to make it okay that I'm doing it. So I put together a skill tree, and there were always in my skill tree 3 different areas. And then I set forth to create what the skills would be, and I progressed through that. And that's how I found, like in many different fields, I still do it, in fact, at 50 years old, I still do this because it helps me figure out, like, these are the this is how I decompose and then feel like I'm making progress toward learning stuff. The other thing is, I literally was a role player. A friend of mine joined the company I was at, went to a meeting with me, and came back home because he was staying with us, and he told my wife, like, I don't know who that was, but that was not Chad at this meeting. Because the only way I could tolerate doing this kind of work and putting myself out there was pretending I was someone else. Not literally, but I literally had to get someone to go to the bank with me and set up a bank account in my first job because I was afraid to talk to the bank people. Like, I didn't know what to say. That's what kind of person I was. So then, okay, now I know how to figure out the skills, and I know how to allow myself to try. So how do I get associated with these people? Because I want to become one of these people. Gesundheit. So I'm a jazz musician, and I want to explain briefly how people discover jazz music and how jazz musicians gain notoriety. Let's imagine for some reason that you like Pat Metheny, the guitarist. And so you get this album by Pat Metheny, and you're like, well, who's on this album? Dewey Redman's on this album. Okay, I like the way he sounds on this. Let's get something else with him on it. Well, here's an Ornette Coleman album that also has Dewey Redman. So who else is on this? The drummer is Elvin Jones. He sounds really good. So let's see what else he's on. Oh, he's on A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. I've heard that's good because I used to listen to U2. All right. So let's listen to more John Coltrane because that was great. Who else is on John Coltrane? Reggie Workman. He's the bassist on this album by John Coltrane. And then Reggie Workman, what is he on? He's on this thing by Ivo Perlman. And so somehow we've gone all the way from Pat Metheny, who's sort of like a cheesy fusion guitarist, to Ivo Perlman, who's some weird guy from Brazil who plays nothing but avant-garde free music. I might also be on this album too. Shameless self-plug. So I immediately started thinking about this in terms of how to figure out the career. And this is the slide right here that teaches you what I did in my career. I just put it in text. So this is it. I did it many times. First, I say organize, and what I mean is be the secretary. So I did all the menial jobs for the Agile community, and then I started doing it for the Ruby community. That's why on my list of accomplishments, it's mostly stuff like organize this conference, organize this other conference. But what does that mean? It means I get to associate with the people like the creator of Ruby and all the brilliant people who are into Ruby and speaking at the conferences. But then I'm associated with them because I'm standing on a stage with them. And people don't really know how to make the separation of okay, you guys are always together doing this thing. You people are doing this thing together, so you must be the same, right? So then I just kept learning. I kept going through my skill tree. And as I would learn, I would start teaching, first through blog posts and then through doing little conference talks, and then really writing. And in my case, I got lucky because Agile and Ruby, an intersection for me was Dave Thomas of the Pragmatic Programmer and then Pragmatic Bookshelf, who asked me to write a book, and then he asked me to write Rails Recipes, which was the second book ever written on Rails, and boom, there I am. Once you've done that, then you get invited to keynote at conferences. So the first time I was invited to keynote at a conference, I emailed them back and said, are you sure you don't mean Martin Fowler? And then you do it again, right? So here's the problem. This is what I did. This is the only reason that I have been successful in my career. I did this. This is it. And it's sort of lame, though. It's kind of a trick, This is why I said, dirty secret. It is sort of a trick. I did it because I wanted to be around people and, be smarter or whatever, but this is the dirty trick. The problem that I discovered is it's really exhausting once you've done it in one, vertical thing to then say, okay, I don't want to be a Ruby person for the rest of my career. No offense, Ruby people. I wanted to do more and more things. I think this is why I was I think I'm done, because I can't imagine continuing to do this process over and over and over again. I actually started with a ghostwriter and a publisher to do the startup pivot, to be the entrepreneur version of this. And I just got disgusted with myself and stopped. Okay, one more system. So as I was exploring this idea of legacy and leaving a legacy, this is what I spent many years working on, both in my day job and in terms of writing and speaking. I built for myself, I guess, a meta system of thinking about how to create systems that will survive. The goal being I can write some code, I can write a piece of software, and maybe it will live longer than me. And it looked something like this, and you don't have to understand the details, but imagine you've got this structure, and then you've got a bunch of tiny little components. And what you do in those tiny little components is you ensure that each one of them is destroyed and rebuilt constantly. And I mean in terms of like the actual implementation. And you do this because you want the system to be resilient to change, and the only way to do that, I think, is to just force constant change. So it's sort of like, the Netflix chaos monkey and all that stuff that happened in the past. If you want to be able to change, then just do it constantly and have that be a part that is non-wavering of the system. So I also spent a bunch of time with Tibetan monks, and I think there was this like impermanence thing that I was kind of grasping at. And of course, I got into the industry, really shot forward in the industry because of this concept of embracing change. So the thing I would always say to the teams I was on and audiences of talks and readers or whatever is this thing, and I think this is actually still true. The system is the asset, and code is the liability. So what you should be building is a system, and then the code, in any case, is a thing that should be replaced. That's where the tech debt comes from if you have a great system. So just allow yourself to be really good at flushing it out. It's almost like garbage collection, but for implementation. System is the asset, code is the liability. The system is the asset until it isn't. So this is almost the end, thankfully. I have these 3 systems that I have applied pretty much consistently to my career that I mentioned. And ironically, what I realized is like this first talk that I did about career development was called Don't Follow the Lemmings. Lemmings really, in the video game, it's not true in real life, actually, I looked it up, but in the video game, lemmings are following a system, and if you don't stop them from killing themselves, they kill themselves. That's the whole idea of the game. And I sort of made a system for myself that I couldn't get out of. And I forgot why I was doing the thing that I was supposed to be doing. So it's kind of like people who are really into agile software development or test-driven design or whatever the du jour thing is. You get so excited about all these systems around what you're building, you get a dopamine hit for doing the thing in the system and forgetting that you're supposed to be building something. And I forgot why and what I was building. I forgot to remember the magic and to be thinking about creating that magic, and that's the reason I got into this in the first place. So the thing that I'm trying to explain to myself, I'm just saying it over and over so I will remember it, so in my new career I can avoid screwing myself up again, is remember the magic, the why of what I'm doing, and even if I've created the systems, probably especially if I've created the systems, remember to allow myself to escape from them, especially when they're working. That's the most dangerous time. So the next speaker is, to me, as I mentioned, both the impetus and the embodiment of a person who is striving to make magic. And so I would like to introduce Sean to the stage.
Cool. Hi, everyone. So when Chad invited me to talk to this, to come to this event and talk, and he said, I'm going to talk about how I don't have a legacy. And I'm like, okay, but like if you don't have a legacy, like I'm like nothing, It's the recent college grad. And I was quite confused why he invited me and what I was going to bring to the table for all these like super experienced tech people who are going to be at this conference. And I spent a long time thinking about what my perspective was and what I had to say that was hopefully at least novel to some of the people here. And if I had to summarize what my talk today was, it's kind of an approach to technology, an approach to your career, maybe a source of purpose or a driving principle. And it's kind of a really overused word now because everyone's mentioned it so many times, but the title of my talk is called Make Magic. And this is a really loaded phrase, so before we go into any further, I want to just play a clip.
The cameras you see before you are color cameras. They are now transmitting a black and white picture. By pressing this button, which I now do, the cameras are transmitting a live color picture. When you step before them...
So this is President Eisenhower transmitting from color cameras for one of the first times in the world in 1958. It was also the oldest surviving color videotape. And I rediscovered this, this clip like 2 weeks ago, and this was done 42 years before I was born, and I was so impressed. I was like, damn, that is incredible. Even for someone who's used to like Apple Retina displays, right? Imagine being there to watch this live in person. It must have felt like magic. And I realized that there are like certain moments in your life where technology just feels magical, where you just take a step back and you wonder how we even made this happen. And there are other examples of this. In 1903, the Wright brothers showed that for the first time, humans could fly. And of course, now we take it for granted. Many of you guys probably took a plane here. You didn't think about anything, but you were like, high in the air, and that is not very normal for human beings to be very high in the air. And it doesn't have to be super complicated either. Couple years ago, Apple launched Force Touch, and I don't know how many people realized this when it came out. I mean, I didn't until like a couple of weeks in. That trackpad doesn't move. So when you click on it, it feels like it's clicking, but it doesn't actually move. Like it's a completely flat piece of like glass. And that's incredible. And I think like there's no tech talk that's complete without this, but in 2024, the most recent example of magic is obviously ChatGPT. And this is cliche, and I'm sure you guys have heard this a lot in many, many tech talks over and over again. But you have to take a step back and remember that a couple of years ago, it was unthinkable to have a conversational interaction with all of the knowledge in the world. Like, that was a really, really hard problem to solve. And just like with planes, like the world moves on, right? Like, you see the thing, you play with it, it becomes normal, you move on, the goalposts move, and we forget to admire what we've actually made happen. And there are many other magical things. I could go on and on and on. I just put a big list there, but this brings me to me. In 2011, that was me dressed up as a mascot, a robot mascot. And I was born in the south of India in this small town called Virdanagar. And I moved to Singapore when I was about 5 or 6 to grow up. And I grew up reading all of this science and science fiction. And I saw this sort of magic in technology. I was super curious as a kid. And when I grew up, I wanted to find a way to make that kind of magic happen. And the first time I had an experience of making that kind of magic happen is kind of oddly related to the color TV that you guys saw way back in the first slide. I guess there are some young people here. So these are RCA cables. You used to plug them into your TV to get video. And when I was living with my grandparents in Virdanagar, they had a problem, which was they had a satellite TV and they had a DVD player, but their TV only had one set of jacks. So what you'd have to do is you have to reach back behind the TV, unplug the jacks, and plug the new one in. And I saw them doing this, and I said, well, okay, I've just learned about this thing. We can buy these little switches, and we can solder wires to them and make a splitter. And I was really bored. I spent 3 weeks in India every year, and I had nothing to do. And I told my parents, I'm going to go learn how to solder and build this thing for my grandparents. And they were like, yeah, sure, do whatever. They were really busy. They didn't think that, this is like 11-year-old handling like hot equipment, soldering stuff. They were like, have fun, knock yourself out. And I was like, okay, so I went, I bought it, I got a little case, made a little box. And then, it was a really cute little thing. So you would flick the switches and it would switch from satellite to DVD. And my grandparents were like, wow, that's incredible. You don't have to reach the back anymore. You just like go to the TV and you flick a switch. Like on, off. It's great. And they ended up using this magical device that to them felt magical for nearly half a decade until they switched to HDMI. They thought it was incredible. And I got the feeling that I got addicted to this idea that we could make things that made people's life really joyful and really feel magical. So, of course, I was a bit naive at the time. I was young. I thought they found it magical because they didn't understand how it worked. It's a bunch of switches. Of course they knew how it worked. But then at that time, I was like, well, to make magic, I guess you just have to find hard problems that you and other people don't understand, and you have to solve them. And that's what magic was to me as a kid growing up. And when I became a teenager, growing up in Singapore, what I decided to do was I decided to do a lot of that. So we would find the hardest problem that we didn't understand, and we'd say, how hard could it be? Let's figure this shit out and make something work. And I say we because I got some friends. That's me, kind of chubby at the side. And we just loved making things that we didn't know how to make and just figuring it out and making it work. One of the first things we built was a little drone, completely designed from the ground up. The electronics were custom, the frame was custom, and it was designed to fly together in a swarm. And we had no idea how to tune control systems. We had no idea how to write embedded code. We just figured it all out on the fly. And I remember getting it to fly for the first time. I don't know if the video is playing. Yes, now it should be playing. And we spent about 6 months tuning it, and we finally got it to fly in my living room. We were like, damn, okay, this is great. And it felt amazing. So that's one example. We did lots of other silly things too. We once made this trebuchet that would spin up to like 300 RPM and essentially to throw a ball really, really far. And I mean, it's not useful at all, right? Like, there's literally no reason to build this thing. It's a death machine. Like, if you walk near it, it will literally kill you. But it was just like, we didn't know how to do it, so we didn't know how to do any of that metal work. And we were like, let's do it and see what comes up. Another really quick example is we built a satellite, and we sent it up on a weather balloon, and that was also really, really fun. But then, as I was building these things, kind of useless things, it's actually one of the purest parts of my life while I was growing up, because there was no intention to fix a problem. There was no sort of attachment to why I'm doing this. This is for my career. No, it was just because it was fun. It was pure, and it was just about technology for technology's sake, or learning to do things. But growing up in the 2010s, I was getting older, less naive, and more aware of what was happening in the world around me. And the 2010s are a very interesting time to grow up in. It was a time where we saw this growing distrust of technology in the public. And I think this all kind of comes together in this really big scandal. I remember till this day when Cambridge Analytica and Facebook had that big data mining scandal. And as someone growing up who felt like technology was a pure thing, it was purely good, it has to be a good thing. And then you see the tools that we've built to sort of connect people and bring people together and empower people be turned around and be used to manipulate and control us. I mean, that was heartbreaking. It was a rude wake-up call for someone who's grown up building all these things. And in a sense, I felt like this wasn't magic. This sucked. This is terrible. And I was, thinking about this stuff, and I also thought about other technologies and services that kind of marked this decade, the kind of big consumer behavior that started to happen. We have things like Netflix, Uber Eats, TikTok, Amazon. These are tools for convenience. They're super accessible. They make life easy. My generation grew up with these things, right? There's just constant stimulation, constant dopamine. There's always something to consume. There's always a new show. There's always something you want to buy. We're just shot up with dopamine all the time. And this is not to say that these services are bad. They do make genuinely, life gets much easier, it gets fun. But, in sci-fi, in the books I read, there was this concept of wireheading. And wireheading is when you attach electrodes to the pleasure centers of your brain, and you give a person a button, and they would just press the button until they die, because they just felt so good. And you would think that, if these are the big companies that define humanity or define what we care about, are we just slowly wireheading all of society? Are we becoming these people in WALL-E? In our wheelchairs, being carried around, have our little Apple Vision Pros giving us content all the time. We're just happy not doing anything. And this was not what I was promised when I was growing up. I was promised flying cars. I was promised brain-machine interfaces. I was promised biomonitoring. I was promised beautiful, ecologically balanced architecture. What I got was next-day delivery, which is cool. I like it. And it's a hard problem to solve as well, technologically and logistically. But it makes you think if magic is just solving hard problems, that means that all of these companies are magical, but they don't feel magical to me. So I was suddenly in a world where technology was kind of distrusted by a lot of people, and the technology that was being built and used by a lot of people felt kind of meaningless and empty and not magical in the sense that I had while I was growing up. And so I thought, well, is magic dead? This was back in 2020, early 2021. I was in university. And right around this time was when ChatGPT happened. And for the first time in a while, I felt like, well, magic was real again. If silicon and compute, the ability to make sand think, was like the magic of the last half century, it finally felt like artificial intelligence was at the time where it could be the magic of the next half century. But I'm not going to preach to the choir here. I'm sure all of you guys are already on the same page there. And still, the picture isn't completely rosy. I only got this article because I was procrastinating my slides. It literally came out on Sunday. And this is a story about a guy called Benjamin Miller. So Benjamin Miller was working in marketing. So he would write copy. So he was a copywriter that was working on marketing and promotional materials for a company. Until, of course, they decided to use LLMs to replace and automate most of their process, to cut costs, of course. And suddenly, most of his team was fired. They kept him, but his job wasn't writing articles at all. And he actually found writing articles genuinely enjoyable and creatively stimulating. But now his job was just to edit them and to make them sound more human, or give the human touch, as you would call it. So you would get an article and edit it, and you make it sound like it was genuine. And this is, one, a highly less paid job, and two, it's highly repetitive work. And he says in the article, he felt as though he became the robot. Not ChatGPT, but him. It was him that was the robot. He was just adding the human touch to things. And it really begs the question, like, I felt that ChatGPT was magic because it empowered me. It empowered me to do my work better. It empowered me to really change the way I work, get access to information at much faster, and stuff like that. But would Benjamin Miller agree with me that ChatGPT was magical? Or would it, for him, just be terrible like the other things? So I did what, this is now in 2023, a year ago, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do after I graduated university. So it's almost exactly 1 year ago. And I felt like I knew what the next magical thing was. It was this artificial intelligence stuff that I thought was really meaningful and it's going to have a huge impact. But there's also all these negative sides to it. And of course, what I did was I climbed a volcano. This is Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh, just to have a think. It's a great place, beautiful place, you guys should visit. And in my head, I had really two thoughts. The first thought was that my definition of magic, of just solving hard problems, was most definitely wrong. Because I realized that magic is not just solving hard problems. It matters what kind of problem you solve. It has to be a meaningful problem. And it's hard to define this as well, because what is meaning to everyone? It's completely different. And for me, I feel like technology has existed for thousands of years, from the hammer to fire to computers. And they've been extensions of our will. And their ultimate purpose is to increase human flourishing. It's to enable us to do more, not less. In a sense, magic is deeply agentic. It's meant to be wielded. It's meant to empower you to do more things. Do things that you couldn't even do before. And ChatGPT enabled me as an engineer to learn and access information faster than I ever could. But it made Benjamin Miller absolutely hate the kind of work that he was doing. He was not feeling empowered, or he was not flourishing. He was doing dreadfully boring work. And so I think we have to redefine magic to say, magic is solving hard problems that increase human flourishing. And that's what I came down of the mountain with. And the second part is actually deeply related to this idea that technology is a deeply human thing. And therefore, it's a deeply moral thing. And a lot of people say, well, technology is just a double-edged sword. You make something, it can be used for good, it can be used for bad. But the thing is, technology is a tool, which means you use it to do something. It's an instrument. And when you design a piece of technology, you intrinsically imbue upon it the way that you're supposed to use it, which makes certain things easier to do than other things. I'll give you an example. Instagram makes one-way parasocial relationships really easy to have. Follow people, never talk to them. But it makes friendships, it's not really coded in the algorithm. So tools implicitly advocate for their own use. They make by making certain paths easier than other paths. So this is really important because we're all technologists here. And this means that when we design technology or we build things, we have a deep responsibility to choose what we work on and what we think would cause human flourishing. And this has to answer a lot of questions about what you think humanity should be, or what we think humanity should be. What do we want to become? And obviously, it's possible to see what other people want humanity to become based on the technology that they release. And in a sense, a lot of the Bay Area and a lot of Sam Altman's work is very clear on what they want the future of humanity to be. And it comes back to this movie, which I'm sure some of you guys have watched. It's the movie Her. And this aims to be a sort of North Star for people building in AI at the moment. And let me tell you a little bit about the plot of the movie. I'm not going to spoil it. It's a dystopian love story between Theodore and a super intelligent, advanced artificial intelligence that controls almost everything in the world. And what it essentially depicts is the consequences of a world where everything is taken care of by AI, even a person's emotional needs and wants. So without spoiling the plot, what the movie is really trying to tell you at the end of the movie is that the human condition can only come from being an actual human being. And even in a world where everything is taken care of you, humanity and empathy are still critical parts of human society. The icing on the cake of this movie, Theodore's main job in the movie is to copyright. And what he does is he transcribes things into handwritten letters because people couldn't figure out how to be emotional to their partners or their family. And that was his entire job, just to write things out. And he creates these like intimate, heartfelt letters. This is really eerily similar to what we talked about with Benjamin, right? And we can see everything moving towards this sort of trend. And I was thinking, like, is this really where we want to go? Like, are the humans in this movie really flourishing? Are they doing the best work they can? Do they feel happy? And I don't think so. And genuinely, basing anything off of something that was meant to be a dystopian movie is probably not a good idea. So I decided after coming down from the mountain that I was going to work on this problem. I was going to come up with a vision for human-AI interaction that felt like it preserves our human agency, it preserves human empathy, and it preserves social interactions. All the things that are important that make us human. And radically, I was thinking, well, maybe there's a way to blur the line between humans and AI, something more like mutual, something that felt more collaborative, something that felt like artificial intelligence is simply an extension of our human intelligence. And I ask myself this all the time, but like, why do people want to live in a world where a super intelligence does everything for them when they could live in a world where everyone is super intelligent? That second option seems strictly better. This is what I've been working on for the past year, and we've developed some principles that I think will make the future of human-AI interaction magical. And this is what magic means to me. So I'll share these principles with you guys, just a few of them. The first one is about internal is better than external. And this basically means that we need to change the modality in which we're interacting with these agents. We've been using the mouse and the keyboard ever since the computer was invented. This was invented back in Xerox PARC by JCR Licklider, great guy. But AI requires new modalities. And what we really need is a high bandwidth collaborative interface. And what this does is it makes these agents, these artificial agents, feel like a part of us rather than something external. When you talk to ChatGPT, you're talking to an external agent. But what you want to feel like is the agent is a part of you. It's inside you. It's in your head. And so I think that this is one way to preserve human agency and control. And it's an integral way to keep humans in the loop in the technology that we develop regarding AI agents. We tried lots of different modalities. One of the modalities we tried is quite interesting. We started with neural interfaces, which were kind of the ideal, right? Because you have literally a way to plug control of AI agents into your mind. And the first kind of project we did is quite fun project. What we did was we wired it up, and we wired it up to sense emotions using an imbalance in the gamma band of your brain waves, which detects valence, which is kind of how happy or sad you are. And we wired that up to a generative audio model. And so you could compose based on how you're feeling. And we won a hackathon for that. I don't know if the video is going to play. Yes. So in essence, it would read sorry for the choppy video, it would read my brain state, and it would kind of change the beat of the music. So if it's low, it means that it's sad, and if it's high, it means that it's true. And it would change it, and you'd be able to compose music like that. And that was kind of the first place that we started. And then, we realized that EEG was kind of hard. The issue is kind of stability, and also no one wants to wear that around, and all sorts of things. No one wants to shave bald either, which would be the ideal. So we worked on something else, which was speech. So speech is kind of the natural interface. If you think about it, when you learn to speak, it's kind of converting your thoughts into a format that can be transmitted to other people. It's the universal interface that we developed as humans thousands of years ago to communicate, not just now with machines, but also with other people. But speech is really annoying, and you want to create this feeling of this modality being internal. But when you speak, you generally speak to someone else. But I do have this thing with myself where I tend to speak to myself softly. So I think about stuff in my own head. I'll kind of vocalize. I'll be like thinking about stuff that I want to present, and I'll do that in my own mouth really softly. And we're like, why don't we figure out a way to tap into that so that you can talk to yourself kind of inside your own head and have that be the modality of interaction. So we built this. So this is a silent speech interface, one of the early prototypes. And this connects to the muscles on your face. and it would pick up electrophysiological signals and be able to decode that into speech. And realized that this was still a bit clunky, so we spent a lot of time trying to make it better. And now we have an interface where you can kind of very, very softly whisper to yourself, and you'll be able to pick that up and convert that into speech. So let me just play a video, and you guys will see what it does.
All right, guys, we're taking a video.
That's me talking really, really softly. You can see my lips move, but can't really see what I'm saying. And the computer should pick it up. Yeah. So we built that. This took about 6 months of designing, building shit, saying how hard could it be, and then getting to work. And this is the first principle. I think building systems that feel internal and external, and this is the first step towards that. Now you have a way to talk to yourself in a way that the agent feels like it's a part of you, almost unconsciously, right? You're walking down, you just make a query, you get it back inside your own head. The second is about the relative importance of intelligence. And for me, human intelligence is far more important than artificial intelligence. I feel like making people smarter is more important than making things that are really smart. And I also feel like artificial intelligence should be used to boost human intelligence, not to get things away from you so you don't have to do them, but to enable you to do more. And this is what will feel magical, right? When you can actually do something that you couldn't do before, because you feel 10 times smarter than you were before you had this thing. In the near term, we like to say this, it means building TAs rather than PAs. So TAs are teaching assistants, so not personal assistants, but build teaching assistants, things that kind of help you, give you the right information at the right time, and push you forward to achieve the things that you never thought you could do. So again, we've been testing this device in all sorts of different ways and seeing what kind of interactions feel magical. This is an interaction where my co-founder, sitting somewhere here, is reading a book. And he's able to query back for things that he needs, and he gets the information, and he's able to just move on with life. Yeah, and he can do this anywhere. He can do it at home. He can do it in a cafe because no one can hear him. He can do it in an office because you wouldn't be disturbing people by going, "Can you tell me this?" to a device, which is kind of sucky. And I think this is the second thing. Build systems that don't take away tasks from you, but enable you to do your work better, which is a slight difference, but it changes a lot of how you design your agents. And the last part here is about human-human interaction versus human-AI interaction. And this is about creating systems that fade away into the background when you don't need them. When we use a phone, we use screens, and now we put the screens so close to our face that they block our eyes. We really take away that human-human connection when you're working together with other people. And I feel like that's more important. That's a bigger part of our humanity than talking to an AI or using a computer. And compute should really only be there when you need it. So again, this is a reenactment of a thing that actually happened in our office when we were brainstorming.
So our current setup is that we have the dock and we have our backend. And we send HTTP requests to the backend, and then backend processes this, and we return a response. Now that we're going to have the Mac overlay, we need to keep the Mac overlay updated about what's going on as well. So we're going to be using WebSockets. But what I'm conflicted about is whether or not we should use WebSockets for these requests as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I wonder if there might be an issue with WebSockets with dock, just because it's a wearable AI device. It's not going to have a huge battery, maybe.
Yeah.
I did a search, and in regards to power, I mean, it really depends on the frequency of the requests. If the frequency is low, an HTTP seems like a better option.
Oh, okay. Then Jim, do you mind finding some data about our typical usage and figuring out how much energy we're using right now?
Yeah, sure.
So for context, the guy who queried about WebSockets, he's not a developer, he has no idea what WebSockets are. That's him. And he's able to interact, right? He's able to learn things on the fly and contribute meaningfully to the conversation. And so this summarizes my magical vision for human-AI interaction. And I'm going to just end off here. So I know we're dreadfully over time. But I think that this is one kind of magic that's going to come up in the next maybe 50 years. And this is one kind of magic that really spoke to me when I was growing up. This is why I'm working on building it now. But what I want kind of to put out there is that we as technologists control what we spend our time on. And I know that Chad talked a lot about career and how do you approach career and how do you leave a legacy. For me, it's always been about work on things that feel meaningful and magical to you, and everything else would sort of figure itself out. And that's kind of maybe a naive thing to say because I haven't really had a career yet. But I feel like if you, I feel like if you inspect your moral values, you figure out what feels magical to you, what feels meaningful to you. And if what you're building is what you genuinely believe humanity needs and what humanity should be, then it just feels more satisfying. You feel happy and you feel like you're productive even on days that you're not. You feel like you're always making progress. And another thing about legacy is that Chad is right. Software goes away, hardware goes away, things evolve, things change. But some people, most people, when they experience magic, they never forget. They never forget the first time they flew on a plane. They never forget the first time, for me, the first time I flew on a plane was incredible. And so I want to leave you guys with this message, which is to go back and inspect the things that you worked on. Think about what moral values you encoded into the things that you've built, and think about whether those are magical to you. And I think that's how you go ahead and make magic in your life and in your career. So that's my take. Thank you so much. I need to go.
All right, so for our final set of keynotes, we have Anil Dash and Molly White. Anil is the head of Glitch and VP of Developer Platforms at Fastly. He's a tech entrepreneur and writer who's been creating internet technologies for 2 decades, focused on ensuring that technology's transformative impact on society, media, the arts, labor, government, and culture is as positive as possible. Quite the responsibility. And he's also followed by Molly White. Molly is a writer and software engineer who dreams of a better web. She's known for her critical writing about the cryptocurrency industry and the Web3 is going just great project. Molly also writes about the much broader technology landscape. Her perspective on and passion for the web has been shaped over the years, spent in free and open access communities like the Wikimedia projects, and she believes that the web can be far more open, equitable, and joyful if we want. Please welcome first up, Anil.
How we doing? We got a little bit of energy? All right, let's go. It's been a great morning. 3 things. We have power. There is no technology industry. The purpose of a system is what it does. I'm Anil Dash. I'm really glad to be here. Chad stole, I think, the first 10 minutes of what I'm going to talk about, so that saves a lot of time. I have a beard also. I stopped talking to these things in 2019. All the code I've ever written has been deleted. Like kind of a recap, same thing that Chad said. So all of that applies. But there is actually something to be learned in the fact that people who've been in this industry for a minute arrive at the same set of conclusions and the same set of reflections. I think the order of operations is supposed to be you go to the mountaintop and then you reflect on things. I'm doing it in the reverse. Just came to the mountaintop. I've been doing a lot of reflecting before this. Part of the reason I stopped doing these kinds of talks was, as Chad had mentioned, like I didn't feel like I had anything to say, but also I had had the chance to speak to lots of people and put out ideas and felt like I needed to spend a lot more time listening and learning. And what I shared at the top is a couple of things that I wanted to pass along that were less obvious. I'm going to start with one really key thing. The purpose of a system is what it does. How many of you have heard that phrase before? A bunch of folks. Great. There's if you want to get into Stafford Beer and cybernetics, there's a whole lot of theory and things you can read. You can Google your way. Well, I don't know what Google will tell you, but you can search your way to finding some documents about it. But the concept actually is very obvious if you think about it just on face value. A system, the purpose of a system, is what it does. And the reason I want to reflect on this idea is that we have the stated intent when we build the magical things that we make. Well, it's supposed to do this. And then we have the gap, the delta, the bugs, between what it was supposed to do and what it actually does. And we can charge ourselves with fixing that, or we can react differently. And these days we're in an industry where increasingly if you point out the gap between what it's supposed to do and what it does, you're a heretic, right? Why don't you believe, right? Right? And I want to reflect a little bit on how we got there. And in my particular case, what I learned about a topic we haven't mentioned a lot today, but that I really think suffuses everything we talk about, which is power. Power. And how often have you been in a business conversation or in a conversation about your career and had somebody directly talk to you about the power that you do or don't have? I think it's one of those things that goes unspoken or that we talk around instead of speaking directly to. I was born and raised in America, and I still live there, and I'm fairly American in being direct about what I've achieved. A lot of cultures have a lot more reticence to say things that sound like they are arrogant or bragging. I'm going to talk directly about things that I've done, and I hope people can come with me on like, these are tasks or accomplishments, but they're always collective, so this is not meant to be bragging, but I wanted to sort of preface with, I'm aware some of these things are going to sound a little absurd, so we'll get there. The thing that sort of catalyzed my moving from having jobs to having a career was being around the early days of what would come to be called social media. It actually wasn't called that yet. I started my personal blog 25 years ago and became part of a community that created really the first wave of social technologies. Friends made the first photo sharing apps and the first blogging apps. And actually at those days, everything that we now think of as social media, whether it's posting videos or liking and commenting, all that kind of stuff was just called blogging. Now that really just means text, but it was sort of a term that it was an umbrella over all this stuff. And it was an extraordinary community, just incredible creativity. It really did feel like magic, the idea that you would talk to the world and instantly have those tools and it would be virtually free. Was transformative. It gave me access to everything. It made my career. It introduced me to all the people that, it introduced me to the people that introduced me to my wife. Like, it's the most fundamental transformative thing that happened to me. And it brought me into what was then called the technology industry. And these days, we still talk about the technology industry. All those logos that you saw up there, right? The Ubers and Netflixes of the world, we talk about the technology industry. I no longer believe there's a tech industry. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is. But at the beginning of my career, I was like, I got to be part of a scene of people building things together. I got to be part of a technology that I found both expressive and empowering. I got to connect to a cohort of people that were pursuing those same goals in ways I felt were very sincere. And it worked. So the company I was part of raised what was at that time a lot of money. Nowadays, it's what they just sort of hand out for showing up at the front door of some of these firms. And we built a tool that millions and eventually tens of millions of people used. And it was the sort of first wave of social media. And what was really compelling to me was I got to help others have a voice, right? So I had my own platform, but I could give people tools. And they went, like, for example, in that first wave of the blog platforms, people built like Huffington Post and Gawker, and these were like, they felt really new. I mean, it's kind of wild because they're sort of shadows of themselves now, if they still exist at all. But at the time, it felt like a new era for media, and it felt like new voices were getting platforms. And it felt like we had democratized access to a capability that before had been very gated. And that was the thing, the kind of empowerment that tech was supposed to offer. And that opened so many doors for me. So I got to do all these other things I've done in the years since. So whether that is starting companies or get to be in the room and sort of meet people that I had admired and dreamed of collaborating with, traveling, coming to events, like that was really, I didn't even know I had a dream of going to speak at events around the world until it started to happen. And most of the things that we tell, like there's so many great young people here, I just have been so inspired by it at this event. It's done my heart a lot of good because I had in some ways become a little more cynical about things, and to see that 19-year-olds and 20-year-olds and people talking about this stuff are thinking about this stuff in the way I hope they would is really reassuring. And I was that person. I was that person that had, in my case, no college degree, had sort of wandered into this thing and got to be in this world. And I didn't really appreciate how narrow that was. until I started to deviate a little bit from the path of what you're supposed to do. Because there were parts of this that I questioned. There were parts of this that I didn't think were inclusive enough. There were parts of it that I didn't think were thoughtful enough. There were bugs that I wanted to report. And at first it was just a little bit of that tickle you get in the back of your head, right? You're like, well, this seems a little off. Is this exactly right? But you know, maybe it's just me. Like you sort of gaslight yourself, right? Maybe it's just me. Maybe this is not so big a deal. And maybe I shouldn't complain. And fundamentally, what all of those things distill down into is maybe I don't have power. The reason you don't say the thing is because you don't have the power to say the thing, right? I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to be ostracized. I'm going to lose friends. You have a fear because you don't feel that you have power. And I'll get a little bit concrete. In that first era of social media, as things were on the rise, we started to see the onset, first, I'm dating myself, first of MySpace, and then later of Facebook. And as Facebook really started to grow very, very rapidly, people could see, well, this was closed. This was a proprietary network, and we had done so much work creating technical standards. Some of these still exist, but OpenID and OAuth and things like that. The idea was that you would, even RSS, like these were these technologies that were meant to enable everybody to connect freely and openly, which regardless of which platforms you're using, tools you were using. And Facebook came in and was in direct opposition to that, right? And again, I didn't have the power at the time to really say, this doesn't feel right. But what we did is we got together the community, and they said, we're going to make a set of tools and formats and protocols that'll let people connect together and build apps that could work across these things. At those times, the hot app was Farmville. Some of you may remember that. Some of you weren't born. And so like Farmville for everyone, right? What a great liberating view. And sometimes our ambitions aren't as high as we might hope. And it happened. There was this sort of sense of like, we're going to get everybody together. We're going to work towards this goal. It was a big deal for us when Google signed on at that time. I don't remember if their social network was Orkut or Buzz, but it was one of those failed things that they did. And keep trying, guys, keep trying. And but it felt like validation, right? So you had all of the big players around, and you had all of these little different networks that we had built saying, we're going to come together and make this open web work the way it was meant to, because it was participatory, because it was something that we could all do. And because I still thought there was a technology industry. It's like the whole tech industry can get together on one idea. And they had a big launch event. It was the first time I'd gotten to see some of these things. It was at Google's campus. They had a campfire for some reason I don't understand. I think Sergey was wearing those shoes with like the toes. I hadn't seen those either. I was like, this guy can afford shoes, right? Like he can't. That's what I remember of the event. But it was very, very well received. People were like, there's this new standard, it's open social, all the internet stuff is going to interoperate together. Doesn't matter what platform you're on, what social network you're on, you're going to be able to do whatever you want. And I wrote a blog post, because that was my job back in those days, was that not just in my personal life was I blogging my way into having a voice, but my job was to say, like, we launched this great new thing, please be excited about it, please try it out. And I got the validation, I'm going to go way over, by the way, too, just heads up. I got the validation that I didn't know I had hoped for, which was, you know, the guy who made the first commercial web browser saw it, which was Mark Andreessen. I'd helped set up his blog, and he saw my post about how this new open social web was going to work, and he linked to it, and he said it was the smartest take of the day, and that I was right, that it was inevitable that open standards and open protocols would win the day on social media. He was at that time, I think, advising or investing in one of the platforms, Ning, that was like an early open social network that would work at this thing. And he was just like, they found it. They did it. This is great. Go read this guy's blog. And I was like, that's it. I've reached the pinnacle. Like this guy who is so credible and so visible has given me the nod. And that feels like a really important, you know, milestone, personally, but professionally, the whole thing. I think it was less than a year later, he joined the board of Facebook and destroyed all that. Right? It wasn't a long time. It was a short time. And it was instructive. Right? I sort of learned the lesson that he wanted me to learn. The purpose of a system is what it does. And I had been very naive. Right? I was like, well, this guy said the thing, and he's pure of heart. We're all trying to make magic here. He must have meant it. And then like 9 months later, when that whole effort was in shambles and the social web got eaten up by Facebook over the following years, I realized that I didn't know how power worked. And it wasn't just money, right? It was power. Who could say that thing? I didn't feel like I could point that out at the time, that this guy was bullshitting us when he said it was good on the launch day, that he'll say whatever he has to say for the thing that he's trying to advance. That was instructive to me. You know, when Ariel mentioned him talking about it's time to build, I was like, oh shit, here we go. But the young folks today are a little smarter than I was, so they know how to take a grain of salt with what they hear. And that really stuck with me in the following years, because it was only a few years later that, you know, we had the moments like we alluded to earlier of the, you know, Cambridge Analytica. For me, it was Facebook's arrival in Myanmar with no staff that spoke the local language, directly enabling the propaganda that led to the Rohingya genocide. You know, you can read Amnesty International writing on this stuff. This is what happened. And I'm not so idealistic as to think, oh, open protocols would have solved this. That is obviously not the lesson. But that concentration of power without accountability certainly did enable that kind of harm to happen. And it happened in a medium that I had believed was transformative, that I had seen make my life better, that I had seen open doors for people, and it was now causing the most unimaginable harm we could imagine in the world, right? The worst thing possible this tech was helping enable. And I felt this weird combination of accountable and not accountable enough, right? I had culpability in terms of being part of this movement, but not enough power to have tried to change things. And that sat with me for a long time. It troubled me apparently a lot more than a lot of the people that were there making those decisions, as I found out later. And it changed me in terms of my career and what I wanted to do, because I had been to the visible place. I had gotten to be the voice. I had followers on social media. I had gotten to be a founder. I'd raised a lot of money. I'd done all those things. And there was meaning there. I'm not one of those people saying, and none of it was all bullshit. That's not true. There was a lot of joy there and a lot of creativity, a lot of power there. But I didn't want the power. I wanted to devolve the power to other people. Like I really, truly wanted to do that. And you have to dismantle kind of yourself in this thing. And I think it's one of those things I would really emphasize. Most of you are getting advice from people inside the technology world who are telling you to aspire for things that I have done. I've been there. And there's very little joy and peace there. I mean, take it from Chad if you don't want to take it from me. So where do you go and find that peace? Where do you go and find like sustainable magic, right, over time? And it's been interesting to watch because I had given up hope. I was sort of like, it's done. This industry is kind of fucked. This is where we're going to be. And in particular, the thing about there being no technology industry, people, the young mentees I'd work with at the beginning of their careers, had started talking to me about, I want to get a job at a FANG company, right? And the acronym changes, but like we've all heard FANG, right? And I'm like, what Facebook does has nothing to do with what Netflix does. These are not companies in the same business, right? Delivering food and offering web services, these are not the same business. If somebody's telling you a thing that obviously is not logically coherent, what is their agenda? Why are they doing that? Why are they conflating these things? And there were a lot more questions packed behind that. We're like, what of the narrative and the story and the rhetoric that you've been given is wrong? And that's where I arrived at, like, the only way I could find to say it is there is no technology industry. There's a collection of companies, like, just because you know how to make an app, like, run on an iPhone does not mean you have anything in common with other people who've done the same task, or they have the same goals, or the same value. Just because you've gotten a website to show up doesn't mean it's the same thing. And so that was clarifying. And once the scales fell from my eyes on that, it was very easy to think about what had to change. And one concrete example was I was the CEO of a startup, Glitch, that was building tools for people to build apps and sites. And we said, we're not going to let people make anything except open websites. It was really clear. It was like, these are going to have to be things that they have agency and control over time. They can actually own them. The people who build these things will own them. The licenses will be open. And then to our workers, we had the first voluntary recognition of a union for our workers in tech in American history. And that was when I first heard from the people who had been ignoring me, whether they were VCs or media people. All of a sudden, they're like, what the hell are you doing over there? And this is a little different in a European context, but in the States, that was seen as very radical, like to just give a damn about labor. And it was funny because I felt the exact same way about our workers as I'd felt about the rise of expression tools for social media a decade or so earlier, which is that it's inevitable. You can feel however the hell you want to feel, but people want to have agency and control, right? And if you can be the one who helps them have it, they will be grateful and appreciative. But you can try and clamp down and have them not have it, and eventually the dam will break. So I saw this a couple years ago, and why I started to get back to thinking about engaging more with these conversations, because I had given up. I thought, like, the social media world is settled, this open web thing that I'd hoped for is done. I was a little too naive and idealistic in hoping for it to have the impact that I hoped it would have. And then, as tends to happen, a bunch of young people made the tools that sort of brought it back, right? Whether it was Mastodon or the Fediverse or these open tech things, people started to actually build or rebuild that set of technologies. It helped that the richest guy in the world screwed up the most important social network, and so they had a little bit of a window there. But God, take it out. A lot of opportunities about being ready for those moments, right? And I saw that flourishing, like people without funding, without access, without conventional power, recognizing that they collectively had power to build things. And so, one of the most amazing things about this to me was, the signifier, the symbol of this was obviously going to be Facebook, now Meta. When they finally launched their new tech social platform, they were like, well, we'll interoperate with this. Now, some of that is they want to be free of regulatory environment constraints, and they want to not get sued out of oblivion in different regions. But also the power of this idea, having come full circle, was undeniable. And the groundwork that people had been quietly doing without funding, without attention, had reached such critical mass that they would re-engage with it. And it was instructive that none of that had come from a top-down directive of somebody saying how to build, right? They had really just sort of said, we think we have power. We think we can build the networks we want to see. And I was a little ashamed for having lost my idealism. I was a little embarrassed that I had given up that it would come back. But I was thrilled to be wrong. It really was something just amazing to see that these ideas are so resilient that they re-emerged almost on their own. What I also realized was, how would I talk to somebody early career about where they would learn these ideas? Because I had been negligent in sharing what we'd learned. If all they've learned is reading from Hacker News, which is run by a VC firm, and a bunch of other media outlets that are just regurgitating what this big tech CEOs have said, how would you learn that this stuff had happened, that there was a 20-year history of people working on it? And then that became the mission, was to find the people that were telling those stories, that were doing the work, that were talking about how power works and whether there is a gap between what we say we do and what we actually do, and pulling apart the times when we were using the myth of a technology industry to mask a lot of complex problems. And then I found one of the most kind of inspiring voices, somebody who reminded me of the idea that you could just blog your way into changing the world. And that was Molly White. So it's been really extraordinary to watch what Molly does, where, obviously there's a little bit of sense of humor in a title like Web3 is going great. But what was more extraordinary is it's patient, calm, dedicated repetition of facts. You just show up every day and you keep telling the truth. And there's power in that can transform an industry. And one of the first times we had a direct interaction was because we were both asked to comment on the then upcoming crypto policy that was coming out of the White House. You can do that just by using your voice as a person. right, with persistence and accuracy. And I had gotten cynical enough to not necessarily believe that it still worked, right? Could that still be as powerful as it is? And the truth is, it remains incredibly, transformatively powerful. And so the thing I want to charge all of you with, and one of the reasons I'm so excited to introduce Molly, is seize the power that you have, use the voice that you have, do not give in to cynicism, and look at these systems that we have and reflect on how they actually function, what they actually output. And if it's not generating the thing it ought to, just change that system. Molly?
I want to start by talking a little bit about where I started. I grew up on Wikipedia, and that's kind of a weird thing to say because I think basically everyone my age grew up on Wikipedia. We used it to learn who performed in the bands that we liked, and despite what our school teachers liked, we used it to help with our homework. But I also grew up on Wikipedia in a somewhat different way than most. When I was 13 years old, I learned that I was anyone when it came to the free encyclopedia that anyone can edit. I started editing then, and I never really stopped. I didn't realize it until much later, but what had started out as kind of a weird hobby for a high school kid to have turned out to be pretty formative for me. It was one of the earliest examples of where I encountered magic. It was one of the best examples, I think, of what the internet could be, both in terms of the end result. It was a massive compendium of knowledge that was available to anyone for free. And it was also incredible in the way that it was created. A group of volunteers from every walk of life working together to collaborate on a shared project, generally without any incentives other than just to make the resource better. But besides being one of the earliest things to make me love the web, Wikipedia also seeded in me a lifelong habit of research, documentation, and archival. To this day, one of the first things that I do when I encounter something that's new or puzzling is go to Wikipedia and edit the article about it. A little bit weird. I know most people do the reverse. This habit is what kicked in for me in late 2021 when the cryptocurrency hype cycle was reaching new heights. I'm sure some of you remember that very strange, sort of surreal period of time. By this time, my love for the web had taken me through a computer science degree and into a job working building web software. And I had certainly heard of Bitcoin far before then. I thought it was interesting back when I was in college and people were using it to send money to one another without any intermediaries. But I didn't have any money, and I wasn't buying drugs on the Silk Road, so it didn't necessarily have any interest for me at that point. But when I did start to hear in 2021 about a new application of this technology called Web3, which I was told would fix everything that was wrong with the web that I loved so dearly, I was interested. I thought, finally, now we can fix the web. So seeking to learn more about it, I did what I always do. I started the Wikipedia article about Web3. But my first ever tweet, if you were to go look it up, about Web3, sums it up pretty well, I think. In 2021, I tweeted, "Wrote a whole Wikipedia article on Web3 last night, and I still don't think I know what it is." All of the marketing and buzzwords and utopian promises made it challenging to figure out what the technology actually was, what it did, and how it was being used. I would later discover that the marketing and the promises were perhaps the primary feature of Web3. As I continued to learn about Web3, I began to realize that perhaps this was not the desirable future of the web or of society or of technology, as some liked to claim. There were enormous problems in the sector, as any Web3 advocate would probably admit. including security issues, frauds, hacks, and other risks that could cause any person to lose all of their assets in a second. But at the time, most of what we were seeing in the news were stories about people becoming millionaires overnight, or of revolutionary technology that was going to fundamentally change our everyday lives. News articles suggested that everyday people should just open a cryptocurrency wallet and dive right in, even with very little understanding of how it worked, or the kinds of threats they could be opening themselves up to. So, frustrated with this lack of attention to what seemed to me to be a huge risk to everyday people who were being drawn in by promises of overnight wealth or getting in early on the ground floor of the next tech revolution, I did what I knew best. I started documenting it. Wikipedia wasn't the place for it, because most of these projects that blew up overnight were not really close to meeting the notability requirements for Wikipedia. So I started Web3 is Going Just Great, which is a blog or a website or whatever you want to call it, which catalogs incidents where Web3 and the broader cryptocurrency world fails to live up to its promises. So anytime a project was hacked or a group of people promising the next big Web3 breakthrough ended up to be just selling vaporware, or someone came up with a harebrained idea like putting all of your genetic data on the blockchain, I listed it on the website. I thought maybe if I offered an alternative perspective to the endless stream of PR about this technological revolution that was surely just around the corner, and highlighted the reality of how the technology was helping or was working and impacting people today, it might help people make more informed choices about whether or not to get involved. So somehow, despite no intention of becoming a technology writer or a critic, my lifelong weird hobby turned instinct to document and write had turned me into one. Quite unexpectedly, the project began to garner some attention. I think it was well-timed for when people started to ask questions around, is this really real? But it was the reaction from many blockchain advocates to what I was doing that shocked me the most. Simply by recording the facts about what was happening day to day in this somewhat nascent industry, I began to be labeled as one of the cryptocurrency industry's biggest critics. People within that world, who are often fiercely protective of the technology in ways that you don't tend to see people become ideologically tied to technology, came out of the woodwork to tell me I was stupid, or alleged that I had some sinister motivations and was being funded by big banks, or accused me of hating any kind of technological progress. Having experienced this backlash firsthand, I saw a stark example of how tribalism and ideological rigidity often manifest in the tech world. Even in an industry where people often pride themselves for a sort of detached rationality and the kind of black and white, ones and zeros approach to the world that often drew them to computers in the first place, people will develop strong attachments to some technologies, and crypto is one of the most ideological. But this was also the first time I came face to face with the realities of how people view tech criticism. In the art world, art critics are often understood to be some of the most devoted lovers of art. In the culinary world, food critics have built careers around their love for food. I had always viewed those who reported on and critiqued technology as, rather similarly. They examine new developments from an outside angle. They often identify flaws that are overlooked or ignored by the people who are building these systems. But when I began to receive this label, it really became clear to me that, unlike with art or food, those who critique technology are broadly perceived to hate technology, hate progress, and want to return to some sort of outdated analog past. People who encountered my Web3 project regularly linked me to photographs of a newspaper headline that ran in the Daily Mail in December 2000, which read, "Internet may just be a passing fad as millions give up on it." The message was clear. I was dumbly, futilely swimming against the tide of progress. I was a Luddite, an old man yelling at the sky. This is because criticism for tech critics is interpreted to mean tearing down, destroying, and stopping technology, not critiquing the technology, interpreting how it interacts with the world and the people around it, and offering alternative context and viewpoints that may not have been considered. Some of these critiques may be negative. Some of mine certainly have been. But many of them come from a place of profound optimism and desire to see technology that moves the world in a better direction. For me, being labeled a tech hater was bizarre. With a deep love for the web and for technology, and sometimes over-idealistic optimism about its future, I began to question if I was wrong. However, the crypto world kept presenting its lofty promises, these sort of one weird trick style solutions to the world's toughest problems, whether it was financial inequity or climate change, without practical evidence that the technology could accomplish anything near what was being promised. The daily reality, to me, seemed much more about separating ordinary people from their money and enriching the wealthy few behind many of these projects. Was I supposed to ignore what was right in front of me? It seems that to much of the crypto industry, and to the tech industry, if it exists, much more broadly, the answer is yes. Ignore the current failures and believe the future promises. Now, I'll defer to Anil and others in this room who've been around much longer than me on how much of this is new. There's certainly always been tribalism, aggressive resistance to criticism, and cults of personality when it comes to technology, as I'm sure anyone who encountered an Apple fanboy a decade or two ago can attest. But as the world seemed to enter a sort of post-truth political era, I fear the technology world came right along with it. It seems less and less common these days for technologies to be pitched on their merits, and instead we're given empty promises about what's surely just around the corner for these trendy new products. Whether it's Web3 and blockchains, or the metaverse, or self-driving cars, or even generative artificial intelligence, many of these trends that have emerged in recent history have a story that's not, look at how this technology is helping people today, but rather, look at this really cool thing that I promise you'll be able to do with this technology any day now. That's not to say none of these products are useful. Some of them certainly are. But we're often told we're supposed to base our opinions on them around how useful, we're supposed to base our opinions on them not around how useful or flawed they may be, but around how useful they one day might be. People are expected to overlook the glaring flaws when it comes to using these products. A person who opens up an LLM, for example, and types in a prompt like the one that was demoed in a Super Bowl commercial, write code for my 3D open world game, will likely be sorely disappointed to see the system spit out 30 lines of boilerplate pseudocode and a sort of apology for the fact that it can't just generate an open world game. A person who watches a flashy marketing video for one of the popular so-called metaverses and signs up is likely to be surprised when they log in and see it's a ghost town with poor graphics. But if you point this out, you risk being labeled a doomer, anti-progress, or stuck in the past. There's also this feeling that poorly designed technology is being foisted upon us, whether we want it or not, with no opting out. Especially with products that bring with them serious privacy risks when it comes to how data is collected, stored, and processed, I'm seeing more and more people, average people, reacting to flashy product launches not with excitement, but with questions. Who is this for? Who even asked for this? How do I turn this off? Can I turn this off? And in a time when it increasingly seems like people within the companies themselves are not asking foundational questions like, does this technology make things better for people? And which people? It's alarming to see the broad reaction to outsiders who raise such questions be dismissal, ridicule, or even harassment. These attitudes from technology companies and their executives, as well as others in the tech world, are not making technology better. By now, we have long outgrown the early idealism of the tech industry, when the internet revolution was predicted to usher in a utopia of freedom and connectedness, breaking down barriers between people and bringing us into an enlightened future. While technological progress since then has certainly been astounding and beautiful and revolutionary, we should also know by now that as much as technologies can be used for good, they can be used as tools for harm. The general public, I think, has awakened to this, as evidenced by commonplace gripes around the dinner table about big tech, and the general mixed feelings among everyday people around topics like social media and whether it's good for us or our kids or our families. Words like Cory Doctorow's "enshittification" have begun to enter the common lexicon because we needed a word to describe the all-too-common rot that seems to almost infect platforms as they inevitably begin to prioritize profits over people. Sometimes I think the tech world, however, was left behind and is still living in that era where technology could do no harm. Much of the tech world still seems to believe that they can just say, "Trust us, we're the good guys," even in the face of overwhelming evidence that this is not always the case. And while this is disheartening and depressing and a bit of a downer, and sometimes makes me wonder if the tech industry is slipping away from all those things that made me love it in the first place, I do still hold out hope. Because amid all of this is opportunity. Opportunity for the many people, probably in this room, who are drawn to technology because they wanted to make the world a better place, or because they wanted to improve one person's life just a little bit. Opportunity for those who are willing to self-examine, to ask hard questions, and to understand that not everything that can be built should be built. Opportunity for those who want to get back to a world where people were excited about new technologies and the ways those technologies might change their lives, not filled with dread as they watched yet another piece of spyware be installed in their devices, whether they wanted it or not. Opportunity for those who are willing to experiment with new business models aimed at benefiting the people who use a company's product, not just the people who invest in the company. And there's also an opportunity, I think, for us critics to push back against the idea that our work is about tearing down technology and stopping the wheels of progress. While there may be some who truly believe that technology is bad and can only lead to horrible outcomes, I think most of us want to see development that takes a more holistic understanding, that technology is not just the ones and zeros, the hardware and the software, but the entire system and the people and the ways they interact with it. How that system is designed is only one part of the equation. How that system is deployed and used, by who, for who, is equally as important. Us critics can also reject the impulse towards oversimplified dualism, understanding that technologies are rarely, if ever, entirely good or bad, and we can seek nuance, even when it takes us beyond the pro or anti stance we might have once embraced. I suspect at least as many people still love technology as did in the naive, idealistic early days. And technology is still making many people's lives better. But so many people have been burned by the profit-first, people-last approach to technology that has proliferated over the last decade or so. And people are much smarter than technology companies give them credit for. And I think they're getting fed up. Now, with the benefits of everything we've learned from painful years of lessons, is the time to embrace criticism and learn to be more self-reflective. I truly believe that there is an enormous opportunity for those who want to build tech for good, who believe in ethics over profits, and who want to treat their customers with the respect and dignity they deserve. Now is the time, I think, for innovation with integrity. For technology that serves people, not the other way around. It's time for the technology industry to rebuild trust and to prioritize ethical practices over empty promises. And more than ever, it's time for us to work together, the critics and the builders, because we're all on the same team, because we all love technology. Thank you.
All right, so next up we have lunch, which is very exciting. We have grab and go bags in the hallway, and we encourage you to go outside on the lawn or the terrace. And there is an exit downstairs by the spa to get you down there. And we also have some extra tables in the front courtyard by the reception. So there's plenty of places to go and find a table, meet, connect, have a great meal. And in the afternoon, the activities start at 2 p.m. So please make sure to get back. That gives you plenty of time to eat and socialize. In the afternoon, please make sure to check the schedule that was sent in the WhatsApp group. I think it was also emailed to everyone. Some things are ongoing. Yes?
Can I interrupt you?
Yes, you can. Okay, I'm being interrupted.
This will only be an hour. The conference, this next thing is about the future, and I thought what could be more inspiring than to have a room of stuff from the future. And so at 2 o'clock in the Salon Rosegg, there's going to be artifacts from the future, and there it is. Last year, I had a completely different set of artifacts from the future. And one of them was this XKCD comic which was a joke about a coffee drink being on the edge of a table. And then that was on a Tuesday. And then the next day, on the Wednesday, this was the actual XKCD, which was a joke about a drink being on the edge of a table. So the accuracy level of this room is astounding. If you want to know the NVIDIA stock price next year, I'm your guy. So come check it out. You can just look around, but also secretly, it's an escape room. There's 5 puzzles in the room. The answer to each puzzle is a 5-letter word. And it's an asynchronous escape room. So you can come and do a puzzle. You can go do other stuff and come back and do another puzzle. And I've got an artifact from the future for you to keep. In fact, here it is. I have brought for everybody a copy of the long-awaited 6th book, The Winds of Winter, for you to take home. Now, my airline has some really serious rules about luggage and how much weight and how much space I can take up. So sadly, I had to leave all the books at home. But I have for you the dust jacket, which is almost as good. So, yes, Mariah is handing that out. And also, in addition, you can take your thickest book on your bookshelf, wrap this around it, and nobody will know. In here is all the rules and instructions for the escape room. And then as you figure out the 5 puzzles, you can just write the answers in. And there you go. So I hope to see you there.
So that is one of the activities that you can do this afternoon. And just to draw your attention, some things are ongoing and some things are happening at specific times. So please make sure to check the schedule for that. If you have any questions at all, please reply in the WhatsApp group for that. And we'll see you this afternoon. Thank you so much.